Hello everyone and welcome back to another vid of Fox Reacts. Today we're checking out a brand new film theory about Encanto, the Madrigal's family secret. Now let's head on down to Colombia.
Nestled in the middle of the Colombian mountains, the magical Madrigal's Encanto is a perfect place. There's no war, there's beautiful weather, there's plenty of food. There's just one
Very
problem.
peaceful.
They're also probably inbreeding. Whoopsie!
Whoa.
No diving in today, friends, because this gene pool is shallow.
Ow.
But just how bad is it? Forget making plants grow or changing the weather. Today I'm asking the question, is the real miracle of the Encanto the fact that they've been avoiding genetic defects for generations?
What are you talking about? People could move into the valley. I mean, they've been kind of talking about
Hello,
that.
Internet! Welcome to Film Theory, where I'm waiting on a miracle. The miracle of you hitting that subscribe button. So, remember that time a few months ago when I did a theory after watching Encanto one too many times with my 3-year-old? Well, we haven't
Still
stopped.
a good movie.
And months later, I still am trying to force myself to see more and more details in the animation to try and keep sane. For instance, I'll be the first to admit that it took an embarrassingly long amount of time for me to realize that one side of the family wears blue tones and the other side of the family wears orange tones, and that people who are in the middle like Mirabel and Bruno have these strong green accents. But there are also plenty of smaller moments too, like here in the opening song. Where's this bridge coming from? We're in the middle of the village and Luisa just picks up a random bridge. What is a complete bridge doing in the middle of the road? Speaking of inconsistencies, can someone please answer this for me, because it drives me nuts every time I watch the movie. Are the first set of cracks that Mirabel sees real? After Antonio's ceremony, she sees cracks in the wall, but when the family comes, they're all gone. So were they real or were they just a dream? Because Mirabel cuts her hand on a broken roof tile, so it had to be real, but then did Casita just fix itself? Or was it actually this guy?
Have you
Casita
been in
could
here?
have forced
Patching
them
the
back.
cracks?
Oh, that? No. All the patching's done by Hernando.
Who is Hernando?
I'm Hernando and I'm scared of nothing.
There are also these cool character moments too. Like here, I love how
why
Dolores
didn't
is
you show the
uncomfortable with
spackle?
Antonio riding a Jaguar. Just a funny, small blink and you miss it look. Speaking of characters who are uncomfortable, well, we would expect Isabella to be annoyed by Mirabel, and she clearly is in practically every scene. Auntie Peppa also gives her a fair number of death glares throughout the movie. Mirabel is just very unpopular in the family. But watching it as many times as I have, I actually think that Abuela's the one that gets the best character beats. Like here, after this moment,
He wants 5 babies.
Wonderful.
Abuela, who is always focused on appearances, picks the one imperfect flower out of Isabella's hair. There's also here where she's sweeping up the flowers from her earlier conversation with Isabella, or here where she subconsciously adjusts her earrings when talking about having to meet the other family, because again, she's all about appearing perfect. But as you can probably imagine, listening to We Don't Talk About Bruno one too many times starts to do funny things to your head. And my mind started to do the thing that it always does. It got dark. See, somewhere after the 45th viewing, it really started to sink in that the people in the magical Encanto have been living there undisturbed for 50 years. Nobody has entered and nobody has left.
Wait,
You know,
really?
the mountains around the Encanto are pretty tall.
And we know this for a fact because the co-director Jared Bush has said multiple
Guess I
times
was
that the
wrong.
family hasn't left and that any new additions have come from within the existing Encanto community, which can only mean one thing: inbreeding. Since there's only a small number of people in this isolated village, and since it's been 50 years of them being stuck there, is this a genetically stagnant population? Do they have to worry about inbreeding? Has
Really
it
a
happened
shame.
yet? Will it happen? Well, I looked into it because of course I
Alright,
did,
let's
and for
start
as
talking.
stupid as this question may seem on the surface, the answer wound up being fascinating because it seems to have some huge
have piqued my
ramifications for the
interest,
ending of the
Matt.
movie, and it puts the return of the magic into a brand new light. So get ready and let's turn the sound up, because now it's time for a theory roundup. As a quick refresher, or for those of you who never saw my
Theory
episode on
roundup.
Count Chocula over on Food Theory, inbreeding
remember
is the
that.
mating of people who are closely related through ancestry. It's a practice that's probably most associated with rich, high-powered families in ye olden days like the Habsburgs, who would inbreed as a means of keeping their bloodlines pure. It ensured that no new
that
DNA
pure
was getting in the
became
family.
corruption.
Why would this be such a problem? Well, as most of you probably know by now, there are dominant and recessive genes that dictate what traits a child gets, and many
Brown
genetic
eyes, brown
diseases
hair.
are recessive traits. This usually isn't a problem. When we outbreed, what we're really doing is shuffling our DNA around to
Nice.
make sure that there's genetic diversity. That way, even if
Nice.
we have a recessive genetic disease, our partner likely doesn't, meaning that the child is protected. However, inbreeding does the exact opposite of this.
Yep.
Blood-related people have similar
Oh.
DNA, which greatly increases the chances of both partners carrying a dangerous recessive allele and passing it on to their offspring. So, while
Gross.
inbreeding was historically used to keep the bloodlines pure, the practice was actually amplifying the
heavy
problems that were
quotes.
floating around in the DNA
Quotes.
chains generation after generation. This tended to result in each generation having decreased stamina, size, and fertility, while increasing the amount of infant mortality.
Ow.
But inbreeding isn't just a problem for the rich, noble families who are trying to stay pure. Since the beginning of time, small remote populations have historically struggled with inbreeding because of their shallower gene pools.
Yeah,
a
that's
real-world
a
example of this
downside.
can be found on the isolated atoll in the western Pacific named Pingalap, also known
Ooh.
as the Island of the Colorblind. The population is descended from
Ooh.
20 people who survived a typhoon which hit the island in the 18th century. One of the survivors was a
Nice.
carrier of achromatopsia, a rare recessive disorder which causes total color blindness. With such a tiny gene pool remaining, today 1/10 of the island's population is totally colorblind. In contrast, here in the States,
Interesting.
color blindness normally affects 1 in 33,000 Americans, with 1 in 100 as carriers. Instead of outbreeding to potentially cause recessive alleles to disappear from the population, inbreeding makes those things more common. So,
Strong
knowing
word, even.
all this, it stands to reason that maybe the village inside the Encanto could share a similar fate. They too are an isolated village with a small population size. Did
I
any of
honestly
you
thought
guys ever have to
people
read
moving
100
into
Years
the
of
village at
Solitude in
point.
English class? It was actually an 11th grade summer reading requirement for me. Anyway, it's a 1967 novel written by author Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Interesting.
Stop me if you've heard this one before. The book is all about the Buendia family, a family that lives in a small remote village in Colombia. The book is full of magical realism, a surprising amount of
okay,
yellow
Encanto,
butterflies,
Madrigal.
and inbreeding, considering that Encanto also
Yep,
features a
hold on,
small remote
ad. We're back.
Colombian village with magical powers and yellow butterflies, it stood to reason that maybe the inbreeding was a match too. Just saying, if the genetically
gross.
undifferentiated shoe fits, wear it. To get things started, I wanted to get a sense of how many people actually live in the Encanto in the first place. I mean, it seems like a small community, but then again, I could be completely misjudging things. After looking at a
Small
few key
community,
group
but
scenes,
yet
I was actually
definitely
surprised by my tally. I first
over
counted
100
everyone
people.
who attended Antonio's gift ceremony. In the stage directions of the script, it says that the whole village is there. It's also the moment that features the most people in one place, so it felt like a good indicator for the overall size of the community. I also counted the number of people who appeared during the Family Madrigal opening number, but I
Like, look at
quickly
this.
learned that the number wouldn't be exact since we see a couple people multiple times. I also did my best to count the number of people who came to rebuild the house at the end of the film. After doing all of these counts and calculations while also trying to eliminate as many confirmed
So many
duplicates as I
people.
could, my best estimate for the number of people living in the village is anywhere between 310 and 320. So that's the current population, but in order to see how the population has grown over the last 50 years, we also have to know how many people entered the Encanto in the first place.
Oh,
the
yeah,
best
that's
place we have to
right.
calculate this number is this scene near the end of the movie when we witness Pedro Madrigal leading a group of refugees away from their homes. We get to see a wide shot of them while the group is crossing the river. And though
Nice.
it doesn't show us everyone, you can definitely count 55 people, consisting of 24 men,
Okay.
17 women, and 14 kids. 9 girls, 5 boys. I don't
Alright,
think it's
alright,
significantly
I
more
see.
than this because as they're crossing the river, they suddenly see riders storming at them from the distance. The group hurries across the water and hides in the woods while Pedro hangs back to protect the group. As he says goodbye to Alma, we see the
Sacrifice
villagers
his
running
life.
past them. Since Alma and Pedro were at the front of the pack in the beginning, it means literally everyone in the group had to pass them during that 20 seconds of screen time it takes for the riders to catch up. As such, it really doesn't
And
seem like
boom.
there are hundreds of people in this group. Since there are several people who I didn't see
Under
during the river
100.
crossing running past Alma and Pedro while he kisses the babies, I added in an extra 20, putting our initial population here at somewhere around 75. Once
Yeah,
you
that
subtract the
seems
14
decent, at
kids,
least.
the extra men, and the 10% of the group who have fertility issues, which is the number that was decided upon by the National Institute of Health, I think in a perfect world
yeah, okay,
scenario, it's safe
okay.
to assume that there were a total of 25 couples in this initial group that are able to have children. Now, over 50
Hey,
years, the population
buddy.
went from 75 to 300 plus. It might seem like a big leap, but in 1950, the births per woman average in Colombia was 6.4. To be fair, in 1900, Colombia's child mortality rate was estimated to be approximately 42%, meaning that
Ow.
almost 42% of all children born wouldn't survive past their 5th birthday due to ailments like pneumonia and TB. However, this village also has Julieta Madrigal, who could probably take a break curing people covered with cactus
Well, no, even then, and she didn't get her powers for at least 30, no, 5? How old are the Madrigals when they first get the power? Anyway, no, that wouldn't have worked until she got her gift. So, for like the first maybe 5 years or so, there would still been kids dying until she got her power and started cooking.
To save the lives of some sick babies. Long story short, between better healthcare, a lack of conflict, and a clean water source, we would expect most, if not all, of the children to survive. I mean, that is kind of the point of the Encanto after all. It's meant to be a paradise. Also, while we're on the subject, no, Julieta is not a cheat code for solving inbreeding. She doesn't seem to be able to cure genetic issues because, as we clearly see in the movie, she's able to cure the symptoms of Augustine's bee allergy, but not the actual genetic causes behind the problem. She can cure ailments like swelling, but not the underlying genetics issue. So nope, inbreeding still at play. Okay, so knowing all of this information, do the people of the Encanto have to worry about inbreeding? Well, in 1980, a long-standing idea in species restoration theories was the so-called 50-500 rule. The idea behind it is that 50 people capable of creating children could prevent the immediate risk of inbreeding, and 500 would help combat genetic drift. 50, huh? Well, that's exactly where our count of Encanto's population wound up. So the Madrigal's village is riding dangerously close to the line. It also isn't helping their case that many more recent articles claim that the numbers from the 1980s are way too low. New estimates range from 98 to 150 to 160 to 10,000 and 14,000. Other articles suggest that the proper ratios here should be 500 and 5,000 instead of 5,500. Finally, in an article from Science Focus entitled How Do Small and Isolated Tribes Cope with Inbreeding, it states that there are tribal customs to prevent inbreeding, but quote, inbreeding only becomes a serious problem when the population drops below 50 or so. Basically, reading the relevant scientific literature, there seems to be no one consensus, which sucks again because Encanto's village is right there on the bubble. So I had to call in the big guns. I asked my buddy Austin from the show The Science over on Game Theory to design a computer model that would simulate mating patterns for Encanto's village, and then track the gene combinations that were being spread to offspring. From there, we would program in populations the size we calculated for the movie and create best and worst case scenarios of mating patterns to see if and when inbreeding would occur. Because there were so many hypotheticals at play, I felt it was best to keep it simple by keeping a 50-50 ratio of men to women being born. After running a few dozen rounds of the simulation, what we found was shocking. Yes, for as perfect as the Encanto was, there would be guaranteed inbreeding. The best case scenario was that it would take 6 generations for the inbreeding to start to become inevitable. Assuming about 25 years per generation, the computer said it would happen sometime around 129 years. But in order to get even remotely that far, you'd have to be very careful about who was marrying who in order to get even... Oh my gosh.
I've spoken to the Guzmans about Mariano's proposal to Isabella.
He wants 5 babies.
Wonderful. Such a fine young man with our perfect Isabella will bring a new generation of magical blessings and make both of our families stronger.
They knew. At the very least, Abuela knew. That's why marriages had to be arranged in this world like Isabella marrying Mariano, to make sure everyone was staying genetically diverse. It is to make the family stronger. Literally, the only way to get 6 generations into this thing without any inbreeding is to carefully track and control genetic diversity and mating patterns. Abuela was the puppet master. Except there's only so long that they can last. Even if everything is perfectly controlled, you still only have a few generations left to go here. When we join in with Mirabel's story, they're sitting at the 50-year mark, nearly halfway through the best case scenario, 3 generations deep. According to our calculations, planning out each generation goes up in complexity squared, which becomes more and more difficult to manage. It's a fortunate thing then that the magic died and the mountain cracked in half when it did. It allowed the people inside to leave, and more importantly, it allowed new blood to come in. It's almost like the magic wasn't dying because the family was growing apart. Maybe instead the magic was dying because the family was growing a bit too close together. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
Well, even there at the end, Matt still proved me right. Where the mountain cracked, people could come in. New blood and DNA could enter the village. I am right. Okay. Well, that's all for today's video. So I want y'all to remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Down in the description will be a link to the original video, so remember to support the original creator and all he does, and I'll see all of you folks next time. Peace.